We are back. It is Business Monday. This is Saul Kaplan. I'm Josh Fenton. Thanks to our friends at Deepwater Wind for their sponsorship, and as always, from the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Mr. Innovation, lots of news coming out of the Boston and Washington area.
Yeah.
HQ2 is looking, it seems to be Vegas has the inside scoop, and it seems to be either Northern Virginia or Boston, Mass. What's your take on all this?
Well, the rumors are flying, so
Yep.
now, you don't know with you news guys. Somebody puts it out there and then everybody just repeats it. But I hear over and over that it's between Washington and Boston, but I don't know.
You don't think Jeff Bezos is leaking this for his own purposes?
Yeah,
I don't think it's showing up in Columbus.
Yeah, well, I don't know. They're logical choices, so I mean, we can talk about them if they are, in fact, the finalists. It makes sense. I think it's an interesting fight between the two, to be honest with you. Amazon already has a presence in both.
Yeah, big presence.
Yeah, I've always said all along that this is about access to talent, but it's also about putting another nexus in the country, beyond what they have on the West Coast, and trying to increase their political footprint, which would argue for DC. Yeah. Right. So there they are, right in the backyard.
Or not.
Right. Yeah. Well, but I like the taltalent argument.
Yeah.
Which I think gives the nod to Boston.
Yeah. Right. MIT, Harvard, Tufts.
Right. Because
Brown,
Jeff Bezos
RISD.
is all about innovation. He's all about what's next, about experimenting all the time. Did you see the letter that Jeff Bezos wrote this week, kind of Warren Buffett style, open letter to the shareholders? You should look at it. You should post it on your site so your listeners.
Is this one where he outed that he has 100 million Prime members?
Yeah. Well, that's one really amazing thing. 100 million people on Amazon Prime, and they're just getting started. Right. And they are obsessed with customer experience, and they have a base of 100 million folks that are signed up for Amazon Prime. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. But read the whole letter, because he just goes over this notion of being obsessed with the customer, which he's been about, right from the beginning. He talks in a very interesting way in the letter about high standards, right? If you set a standard for excellence, you're a whole lot more likely to achieve it. And he wants that for, the 500,000+ people who now work for Amazon and growing like crazy. But he talks about setting high standards and says, just because you claim that you manage personally to a high standard, he says it's domain specific. And by that he means I could have a really high standard in one area of my life, but you could have a blind spot in another one. And so he challenges himself and the whole organization to do it. I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm rooting for Boston. I think it's in Rhode Island's best interest. It's in New England's best interest for this to happen in the Northeast. I think there are going to be overflow effects here in Rhode Island, so my sentiment is rooting for Boston. I had always hoped that we would figure out how to help strengthen their bid, because it's in our best interest to do that.
I think it's very interesting. I think it is wildly exciting for New England, but I think there will be some unintended consequences.
Oh, so absolutely.
50,000 new people, well paid. Where are they going to live? And the implications to a market like this, where real estate prices are already disproportionate to income levels. Let's say we get 5,000, 7,000, 10,000 affluent people moving to Rhode Island. Great, wonderful, but that's not going to certainly help our affordability problems.
One of the things I read about Boston is that if you actually look at the people who live in the surrounding areas, right, of all the finalists, they have the lowest percentage of people who actually live in the area that support the deal, right? It's just true, right? Because of that, because of
in traffic. I mean, in Boston,
unintended consequences of success.
People did not want the Olympics in Boston.
That's
overwhelming,
for sure.
70. I think it hit up to 75%. And in part because even though it was only going to be for really a month, 6 weeks, they just did not want to deal with.
Well, there's a lot of people who don't want Amazon HQ2 for that same reason. I believe
some employers have got to be worried about somebody going out with 50,000.
Grabbing all that talent.
Grabbing all that talent.
No kidding. No kidding. But, I think this is a high-class problem to have.
Right.
In the end, if Boston wins,
You don't want to be so parochial that you're arguing against one of the leading companies in the world coming
But you
into your
want to have
market.
your eyes open for the unintended consequences, that any successful play has. Anytime somebody new moves into the area, there's more competition for talent. It drives up the wage levels. That's great. If you're on the receiving end of that,
Absolutely.
that's not so great if you're a business struggling and you're not competitive and you can't afford to pay those wages.
Absolutely.
So the real key here is how to be successful with your eyes open and empathy for the impact of what that success means. We've talked many times about all of the success we're talking about here for Amazon, right? It really hurts a lot of the parts of our economy that weren't ready and are still not ready. That's not my argument for why we shouldn't support it. It's the argument for keeping your eyes open and having empathy for the fallout, for the consequences of what this new technology and these new business models actually mean.
Well, listen, at the growth, the rate of growth of Amazon, it may be 50,000 in 5 years. It could be 100,000 new jobs 5 years after that, the way that company is growing.
Oh, it'll be way more than that, but they'll spread it out because they'll need to get they'll need to go get the talent, and you can't get it all from the same area. I mean, at a smaller scale, we have that same challenge. All of these new deals for here in Rhode Island are all looking for the same high-tech digital,
they're all looking for
data
the same
management skills, right?
Programmers, etc.
Right.
And in most cases, we've exhausted all those resources. And many of the folks that are taking these jobs at J&J and at GE, etc., are coming into the state, which isn't the worst thing.
Which is a good thing
as
too.
well.
Which is a good
but
thing
it
too.
only masks our problem of K through 12,
Correct.
CCRI, which we've talked about a lot.
Right.
And I've not kept up with what the timeline is. Do we have a date certain?
I've not seen any date certain. I don't think they've committed to a date certain, and so that's why I have to question whether the knowledge of who the two finalists are is real or not. But it makes sense that Washington and Boston would be amongst the finalists. And again,
I've always felt
root
it
for
had to
Boston.
be an East Coast. This idea of Denver or Chicago,
No, I would agree.
or that just doesn't make any
For
sense.
the reasons we talked about before, not just getting talent, but that more and more of our government leaders are going to be having to pay attention to these trends. We know from watching the Facebook hearings that a lot of our elected leaders know painfully little about this changing technology and what it means for society. It was embarrassing to me, to see how little our leaders actually know about something that's going to change all of our lives and is already changing our lives. So I hope it's a clarion call to think about leaders that actually know something about the levers that are going to affect our life.
It was so embarrassing. Literally not
Right.
have any idea of how to turn on a computer. Let's jump over to our favorite subject, Deloitte. We called for the state to cut ties with them in an editorial today.
Yes.
Enough's enough. This thing's going to end in litigation one way or the other. I think there's already ongoing litigation that's on hold, trying to get some leverage over them. This thing's ugly. It doesn't seem to get any better. The best news we've heard is that under the domain of the special master, food stamps will work at an acceptable level, not exactly 100%, and that's supposed to take place on May 19th or 20th, but cost increase, it looks like another 100 million, and there seems to be some lack of attention to the fact that even after that 100 million, just the maintenance and natural growth and of the amoeba is going to cost tens of millions of dollars.
The amoeba.
Add in that the feds are now starting to penalize Rhode Islanders with penalties. Enough's enough.
Listen to you getting all biological, the amoeba. That's pretty funny. Okay, we were talking about this in my office today. You get the grades for the compelling headlines for sure, right? Listen, there's plenty of blame to
There's
go around
a 40-page paper application after spending $500 million. What factoid do you need that this entire technology overhaul is so fatally flawed?
Yes.
Tell me a company in the United States, in the world, that would spend $500 million and come up with a flawed system. major corporations in the world don't build information technology infrastructure that cost $500 million.
My point for today, because we've talked plenty about all the problems and all the blame to go around.
Do you notice we divorced ourselves of any blame?
You asked me a very specific question.
Yes.
Your headline says, should we fire Deloitte? Let's go back to your unintended consequences. So I know it makes a great headline. Fired, first of all, Deloitte is,
I think it was
is
affirmative.
giving us this
Fire,
service
it's
for
time
free.
to fire Deloitte.
Yeah. First of all, the work they're doing now, we're not paying for. So in the scenario that you say fire Deloitte, do you imagine us having to hire someone that we would actually have to pay, or are you actually saying let's walk away and treat the whole thing as a sunk cost?
Well, I think the question is really, are we not paying them, or are we just not paying them during this period of political season, and that it's holding off litigation? At some point, the continuation of this program is not going to fall under the existing $500 million.
Yeah.
It's going to incur additional costs.
That's true regardless of, that's true. Any care and feeding of the system and getting it right, yes, there's going to be costs going forward, right? But if you treat it as a sunk cost and you say, let's stop and let's completely start over again. How long is that going to take? How much is that going to cost? What happens to customer service, citizen service in the interim? So before you start
Do you
saying...
think Salesforce, one of the more complicated constructors of information technology that links, QuickBooks and this and that and different platforms, do you think they spend $500 million to connect five different distinct? No.
They do, but then they sell access to that platform to all 50 states, right? To be able to make a return on that investment. There is no question that if we have a clean sheet of paper, right, that we would do it very differently. It would be citizen-centered, as we've talked about before. It would be designed to make the citizen's life easier and the efficiency on the government side.
So your argument is, hey, listen, we've already down this route. Forget that the program doesn't work. Forget that it's not customer-centric. Forget that we're even on a paper-based 40-page document. We're too far down the road. We got to continue.
No, I'm not arguing
off the
that.
Cliff to plunge to our death.
No, I'm not arguing that. I'm saying,
am I
if you're
unfairly framing that question?
That's not that's not the argument I'm making. We do have to go forward, and there are options. Yes, one of those options is write the whole thing off and start over again. I don't actually think that's probably the option that we're going to end up with. So before you start saying, fire Deloitte, tell me what the answer is so I can
I think it says it. It
says,
says, listen, wind down. We're going to end up in litigation regardless. That's a guarantee. Every state that's worked with them virtually.
Of course.
Cisco in Oregon was $300 million.
And we'll try to recover as much of it as we can.
Try and recover. But let's start the process of upgrading the system. We also have good indications based on the oversight hearings that the system really isn't going to work how we would expect it to work. And also it's 6 year old, the framework of it, how this was envisioned is now 6 years old.
We're ready for the next one. We're actually ready for the next one anyway.
What technology is 6 years old now?
My point is...
How old's your website?
Figure out, we just launched our new website.
Okay, and you're going to hold on to that for 6 more years.
6 months anyway. 6 months. Now they're really worried back in the office. No, I think you have to be thoughtful about what the available paths are, and it's never as easy as just stop doing what you're doing, right? It's usually more nuanced than that. I want to see an analysis, right? And before you start pointing blame at any one of the parties, right? There's plenty of blame to go around.
I think that editorial
right?
said that 100%.
Right.
This is not. We got to get out of the blame game. Blame of the game is the political season. Let's skip over that. Whatever it is.
Well, you got us talking about it in the office. Now we're talking about it here today.
Absolutely.
So I guess that's what the news story is supposed to do. Yeah, on this you were right. I mean, it's a mess, and it has been a mess. Way past this way before this current administration. That is not an excuse for not being really clear about what the path forward is and being held accountable for outcomes, citizen service.
Are we bound to have the same type of outcomes because we don't have the expertise within state government to design, envision, engage people in creating new technology solutions to old customer service problems?
Well, we do have...
Health Source, you cannot do by mobile.
It's not just our state. This is true in government at every level. We just talked about, the lack of technology skills, sitting at the federal level,
Yep.
with our leaders. If these capabilities are the capabilities and the superpowers we need to make our lives better, we have got to source the talent that can help us deploy these new capabilities in a way that improves the lives and outcomes for us, the citizens here. So yes, at every level.
So let's tie the two together. Is there
Go ahead.
any chance that Jeff Bezos, and part of his constant level of innovation, is looking at replacing the Amazon platform with a 40-page paper document, that would be how you utilize Prime? Is that that one of the things on the whiteboard over in Seattle, soon to be Boston or Washington?
Well, I'll tell you what is on the whiteboard. It'll be to the tune of many billions of dollars. Amazon Web Services is underpinning many of these new capabilities.
Absolutely.
And Jeff Bezos did it for himself, and then he put that platform out, and it's one of their fastest growing service
and
lines
crushing competitors.
Right.
And they get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. We've always used Amazon Web Services in our 8 years, and literally the bill goes down.
Right. Right, because they keep getting better because they're focused on customer service. For them, it's always about the customer, and so we need government leaders and education leaders and healthcare leaders that are about the citizen, the patient, the student, and be relentless about creating solutions that make their lives better, get them access to the capabilities they need in a more accessible way, in a less expensive way. And that simple idea is what drives Jeff Bezos, and it should drive every leader that wants to stay relevant and be competitive in the 21st century.
I want to thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we pounded the proverbial blank out of both issues. Biff's coming up. Last week we didn't get a Biff preview. Biff's in 5 months.
It's coming. It's coming.
5
it's coming.
months, 4 months, 5 months. Give us a little indication of who will be.
So I just released a podcast, part of my podcast series, with an incredible. She's a futurist. Her name is Rita J. King. And she'll be a storyteller at the BIF Summit in September. She coined this idea of the imagination era, imagination age, and then deconstructed that to what does that mean? How can we unleash the imagination in all of us? Not just the folks that we point to and say they're the creatives, let them be creative.
Right.
But how can all of us, mere mortals, tap into the imagination in all of us and tether it to problem solving to do the kinds of things that you and I talk about every week. She's remarkable. You can go listen to the podcast I just did with her. It's really worth listening to. And then at the BIF Summit, she's going to tell us what she's been working on now. It's fascinating. Rita J. King, really good addition to our lineup.
Excellent. Cannot wait for Biff. It is number.
This will be our 14th year.
14th.
Yeah. Imagine that.
I think you should force all the gubernatorial candidates to attend BIF. It would be the best thing that ever happened to them.
It's still one of the most fun things we do. It is so inspiring. Just curating and building relationships with all of these folks who share stories, and then putting together the group from around the world who actually comes here, to Providence, to Rhode Island, and every year it's the same. People come here and they don't know any different.
Yeah.
They think we're the most innovative place, and say,
well, I like going because I take it as osmosis. Just being in the room with all those smart people, that some of it will transfer.
Now you know why I do it, in the off chance that some of it's going to rub off on me, right? That's exactly right.
To your eye, guys.
There you go, not bad, right?
Yeah. Listen, everybody, I want to thank you for tuning in. Mr. Innovation, Gary Sass, Matt Hassett, Will Morgan. It doesn't get any better than that. A lot of smart people on today. Maybe a few too many men. Next week we'll balance this out a little better. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow at the 3 o'clock hour. Have a great night and enjoy this beautiful spring weather.